Welcome to the Gender Justice in Disaster Conference, Inspiring Action, with the session of Women in Fire and Emergency Leadership, Reflections on the UK and Australian Experiences and Ideas for Systemic Change in Gender Inclusion. I'm Donna Wheatley, a Commander with Fire Rescue Victoria. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which today's training and seminar is taking place, and the traditional owners of where you may be viewing this from. I pay my respects to Aboriginal elders, past and present, and I recognise the ongoing living culture of all Aboriginal people and support Aboriginal self-determination and their fight for reconciliation and justice. I'd like to welcome our panel this morning, depending on which half of the globe you're in and you're streaming this. We have Dawn Hartog, who is the captain at Toolangi Fire Brigade. She's a senior project manager with FFMVic, Forest Fire Management Victoria, Culture and Diversity. Quinn Cramer from Queensland Fire and Rescue Service, who's also the board president of Women and Firefighting Australasia. And Alex Johnson, who is a former and future Chief Fire Officer, the Regional Director of South East United Kingdom. And we have Becky Bryant, who is also a Chief Fire Officer. And I believe that, Becky, you were the first woman chief who came up through the ranking recruits, which I know in my organisation is held as one of those things that people measure you against. Did you do the recruit course at the same training college that I did? And I feel like that's a bit of an old staid tradition that we're challenging. Who says you have to come up just one ladder? Perhaps we could make it a jungle gym of progress through leadership across our organisations. Definitely something that I would like to see us challenged a little bit more. Thank you so much to all of you for being here at different times of the day in busy schedules. I really didn't want to reread bios. I know that our viewers will have taken a look at the inspiring people that we've got on the line today. I would like to throw over for you to be able to offer something of who you are and what you're up to in this space at the moment. So we were talking about whether we go alphabetically. We're definitely not going by rank. So I might throw over to Quinn Cramer first. And she didn't know that she was going to be first. Give her a second to unmute and she can tell us about what she's been up to in this space.
So just working with Waffle, just improving our ability to communicate and offer services to our members in this COVID times where it's a bit challenging to run face-to-face courses and developments. And in my own personal time, I'm training for my 9th Bike for Burns charity ride, where I'll be riding around about 1,000 kilometres in 8 days next month.
Did you just say 1,000 kilometres in 8 days?
Yeah, so the original ride is actually supposed to be a 7-day, 710-kilometre ride, but then we decided we'd ride Brisbane to Gympie, 230 Ks just to start the ride. And then we thought we'd just add an extra 10K each day to round it up to 1,000. So.
Just a warm up. Fantastic.
Yeah. Makes Alex, it worth
yeah. Alex Johnson, could I ask you to tell us a little bit? I know that you're here today representing Women in Fire Services because you have a very busy full-time job. You thought that you would take on some volunteering. Can you tell us a little bit about that as well?
Yes, so Alex Johnson, I'm, like you said, formerly Chief of South Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service, and I will be going back as Chief in May. I'm also one of the executive board members of Women in the Fire Service, which is the equivalent of Waffle in the UK. And I've been doing that for 26 years, a couple of years after I joined. And I suppose the strangest thing that I've been doing at the moment is I've just qualified as a vaccinator so that I can administer the COVID vaccinations along with a number of my staff that have also trained up as volunteers. So yeah, a bit of a strange thing to be doing as a chief, but really looking forward to doing it.
Well, it's definitely a time across particularly the Northern Hemisphere where everybody needs to literally roll up their sleeves, whether that's out through the pandemic or be involved in the vaccination so that we can move through the real difficulties that we've been having. And certainly my thoughts have been with everybody in the countries that are so hard hit. I've been very grateful to be a Southsider through this time. And Becky, could I throw to you for a little bit of an introduction about who you are and the key things that you're working with at the moment?
Morning, Donna. Hi, everybody. It's lovely to see you today. So Becky Bryant. I guess my big passion over the last few years has been around leadership development and cultural development. So I firmly believe that we need great leaders in order to deliver great things, but great leadership perhaps isn't what people necessarily think it is. So trying to move from the space of command and control into a much more inclusive and transformational style of leadership. So I'm the project executive for the leadership project for the National Fire Chiefs Council, which is the professional association representing all UK fire and rescue services. And we're heavily involved in developing a range of products at the moment, so a range of toolkits. And the one, Donna, that you mentioned really interestingly about pathways into different levels within a fire and rescue service. We've just launched our direct entry project, which would see people being able to access at station manager level, which is the bottom end of middle management in the UK FRS structure, and then area manager level, which is sort of the top end entering into strategic leadership positions. So this would be for generally people who have not had any involvement with the fire and rescue service, but who are leaders and managers in their own right, but just in different industry. And we've recognised that that diverse range of pathways is really important for us as a sector in order to encourage diversity in all its facets into our organisations.
I couldn't agree more. And I think sometimes the one pipeline means that you don't, it's so hard to engage. Here in Victoria, we have people sign up for a 30 to 40 year career. So any movement is extremely slow. So when you want to do paradigm shift, you really can't, because you only have one lane in which to travel. So I'm very interested to hear more about that. Dawn, can I throw over to you? You wear many hats, and so tell us a little bit about what's keeping your passion alive at the moment, or taking most of your time.
Excellent. Yes, thank you, Donna, and hello to everybody who's tuning in. So my name is Dawn Hartog. As Donna said, I wear quite a few different hats. I have a firm belief that life is short, so I want to grab as much of it as I can. So I'm the proud captain of Toolangi Fire Brigade, which is an amazing fire brigade. I know most captains think theirs is the best, but I'm truly blessed to have an amazing group that sit alongside me. I'm also privileged to be currently heading up the Forest Fire Management Victoria, or FFMVic, Women in Fire and Emergency Leadership Program, looking at culture and diversity across the FFMVic partnership, which is made up of DELP, who I am directly employed with, Parks Victoria, Melbourne Water and Vic Forest. And then I'm also privileged to be able to sit on the CFA board, Country Fire Authority board, as one of the members through one of the volunteer representatives that is on the board. So it all keeps me excited and passionate about this area, and it keeps me very busy, but happily busy.
And it looks like everybody's really enthusiastic, that happily busy. It is a thing where people are taking these extra roles on because there's a need for it to be done in an extracurricular way still in a lot of instances. And thank goodness there are people with lots of motivation and enthusiasm to bring. So all I can say is that there's a lot of diversity in the different work that you're doing. And I know that we like to look at a lot of the different facets of what diversity means and where intersection is when we're looking to have inclusion in fire services. And often we sort of, we talk about if there is, a service that supports and includes women, then it will be a service that supports and includes people with other diverse facets, and vice versa. So we might, we're talking to women who are leading in fire services. We're not talking only about the way in which they're leading women into and through those services. So I think that we're up for a bit of a treat of different things that are to be covered off. Now, I thought that I might start at, because Alex, you sort of referred to women in fire services being similar to Waffle, and that being a really grassroots, boots on the ground about engaging people who might have an interest in coming into the organisation back at that recruitment level, which is a lot of what Waffle does as well, to try and increase the understanding of people that firefighting is a job for women as much as for men. So would you talk to us a little bit about some of the initiatives that you've taken on the ground there about casting the net out to encourage and broaden people's minds as to what recruitment into fire services looks like?
Yeah, so I think we recognise that services are all doing different elements of positive action and have different amounts of resources to put into that. So at the moment we're looking at providing, as part of the corporate membership for fire and rescue services, a online, and COVID has, if you like, pushed us into more virtual events and realised it's something we can do, because when you've got volunteers from all around the country, getting everybody together is difficult and it costs money. So what we're doing is we're looking at providing virtual positive action events for services who may have a list of women that are interested in becoming firefighters, but maybe they're not recruiting at the moment, but keeping them engaged. So we're going to run sessions on fitness, we're going to run sessions on interview techniques, we're going to run sessions on talking to a firefighter, somebody that's perhaps not been in the job too long, so they can talk from experience, to keep these people engaged, because we know a lot of women and other underrepresented groups tend to maybe lose interest because we're not recruiting when they're ready to go for a job. So it's about keeping them engaged, keeping them, trying to link them up with people from close to where they live. So I spent quite a lot of time recently linking people in to their local on-call retain station so that they can actually get that introduction, because it's a big step going and knocking on a fire station door and going, hi, I want to be a firefighter. So linking them in and giving them another woman to support them from their service. So we're trying to sort of support services in their recruitment campaign, and so that women, when they get to that selection process, they're better equipped to, hope to be successful. So that's one of the things we're doing at the moment, and we're also looking at expanding it into, and it sort of links into Becky's leadership. We have a lot of women who will make great leaders, but they're so concerned about proving that they've been to this job, to that job, that they've not done long enough here, and they've not done as long as that person. So doing a bit of sort of informal coaching, mentoring, and sort of saying, look, I've done it. And I was no more experienced than you were, and getting women from all levels within different organisations, just have informal chats with people to empower them to believe they are ready for promotion and to become, whether it be supervisory or middle manager or strategic leaders. So that's another area that we're looking at, and I think COVID has helped us sort of branch out into those areas, and it's brought a lot more volunteers from women in the fire service to want to help. So yeah, quite exciting times at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think COVID, it's a blessing in some ways if we can find that, and the fact that everybody's been pushed to online, it means you can innovate across a geography that might have had the tyranny of distance. So Women in Fire Services sits across the whole country, and you've got regions, and you engage with each one of those services. Is that, do you get good uptake across the board, or have you had some brigades that are super keen to engage you and use what you're offering, and others who are like, we don't need what you're offering?
It's strange. This year we've got all but one fire service have become corporate members, and we've always had a few that haven't, for different reasons, and as far as I'm aware, the only one that hasn't joined this time is because they can't afford it. It's a financial decision, and their budget really is tight. So I think what's changed over the last few years is we started to be inspected by Her Majesty's Inspectorate, and they have put a very strong emphasis on, I think the word was woeful, diversity. I think that was the word that Sir Tom Windsor used, which we've known for a long time. We didn't need anybody to tell us that, but now it's written, and I think services are starting to realise that, things like Becky's leadership programs, the mentoring programs that we're looking at, and the support networks such as WFS or the Asian Fire Service Association can support services in helping their women or their BAME staff to have a better working life. So what we're seeing from that is more women are coming forward from services to be involved, which is really good, because, you know, I'm not going to be here forever, and we need people coming through to carry on and sort of keep pushing women in the fire service. So yeah, it's been a really good uptake this year, and I don't know if that's related to COVID and the Her Majesty's Inspectorate, maybe a bit of both.
Maybe. And you're absolutely right. Succession planning is so important. And when we have such a small pool, we don't have a lot to draw from when we're putting that extra burden, particularly on women in this instance where we're wanting them to volunteer their time. So Quinn, some of those points that Alex made remind me of the work that Waffle does, and I guess part of today's session is about comparing UK to Australia, and I know that we like to incite a little bit of competition and a little bit of learning from others as well, so a bit of both worlds. Do Waffle do some things that Alex hasn't spoken about is one of my questions, and the other one is about, we have the same similarly, the difficulty with jurisdiction being across urban and rural services in each one of our states. So we don't necessarily get the uptake. How does Waffle compare to how Alex is reflecting on the UK?
I think we compare fairly well. There's a lot of similar programs that we have in use. We've done some really successful physical abilities testing familiarisation exercises with Fire and Rescue New South Wales, which have shown really great results. We do some mentoring with people who contact our organisation and seek to find people within other organisations that they're looking to recruit into. And even at developing people for leaders going through, we offer a number of different mentors that we can assist them with. And we also, via our normal regular updates and newsletters, provide assistance and courses, access to courses that people might not have thought of, and access to podcasts to provide some of that inspirational leadership. But again, it's really has been difficult to liaise with different organisations and find that real connection with them to keep pushing forward within the inclusivity space. We get a lot of engagement around our biennial conferences from organisations who are keen to participate, really keen to offer up. But then once the energy sort of dies down from them, we found it really hard to continue to engage with some of those organisations beyond. And it's really can often be reflective by who's on the board and who's willing to stay in the game and engage with us and really drive that organisational change.
Yeah, I'm sure that if you have board members who are in services, then they know the people and they can make those approaches, which is a little bit different to the cold approach if you don't have a connection there. So we'll definitely have to put the challenge out to AFAC as our peak body, and to each one of the services across Australia that we'd like to see that almost 100% hit rate that the UK is able to shine about.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the start of the Champions of Change group has had any influence on how engaged we are with different organisations, as most organisations have representatives upon that group. But from a WAFA perspective, that group doesn't necessarily have the diversity within that group that we can offer those organisations.
Yeah, and there is a good uptake on the male champions of change, and that's definitely the heads of those organisations. And I often quote the statement about, strategy, it's culture, we'll eat strategy for breakfast. So you can have a glossy brochure with the head of the organisation, but if you don't actually get people's buy-in about why we're doing this, then it just collects dust, doesn't it? Yeah. So Dawn, you wear hats around the volunteering in a brigade, being on a board, which obviously has a whole different level of influence, and then being a paid member of a staff who are being developed by FFMV to, have seen the need for the investment into women in retaining them and developing them. Can you talk to us a little bit about that program and where you see some of the intersection about the engaging women at this coming into the system that both Alex and Quinn have spoken about?
Yeah, sure. So we've currently, we're coming to the end of a current 4-year cycle of a program that received funding to specifically look at the amount of women and opportunities and barriers for women in not only Department of Environment, Land, Water and Planning, which is DOPE that I work in, but across the Forest Fire Management Victoria or FFMVic partnership, like I said before, which is, contains Parks Vic, Melbourne Water and Vic Forest as well as some other members who, through different kind of changes in departments and such have gone in different directions, but they're still part of our operational workforce. So whilst our department actually has really impressive numbers of women across the department, once you head over into that operational space and into the fire and emergency management or emergency leadership space, we just completely fall behind. We're currently sitting at 25% women in the operational workforce to 75% men, and we're obviously looking to bring that up significantly. I had an ambitious plan of trying to increase 5% each year over the next 5 years to get that 50%. That might be a bit ambitious, but we can try. But the program itself came as a result of some research that was conducted to really flesh out what are the barriers and what are the issues and why aren't we getting women in, and why aren't they getting promoted. So it was stuff that we knew in our gut, we knew anecdotally, but we've now got it in black and white. And we've since conducted a second round of research at the end of 2019 to see how are we going. I'm happy to say that there has been improvements in the space, not as quick as we would like, as quick as any of us would like, but it's really focusing on elements such as appropriate workplace behaviours and eliminating, sexual harassment, discrimination, having that diverse and inclusive culture. So understanding, what is the environment that we want, and as you spoke of, that culture piece and that strategic piece, we can have all the action plans, the strategies, everything we want, but if we're not actually looking at who is in our workforce and how they're behaving, and the concept of belonging to a service and belonging to an emergency management, we're not going to keep them even if we get them through the door. But we're also looking at how are we recruiting? Are we recruiting using proper terminology? So we're putting gender decoders across our recruitment, across our ads, across our communications to actually make them more friendly to all genders, not just men and women, as you spoke about at the start, to look at across those genders with the acknowledgement that the flow-on effect to other diversity groups, to other cultural groups, we're hopefully benefiting that larger workforce piece. Also looking at opportunities for development and pathways and opportunities for deployments and for training, and why aren't we getting those equal numbers? So we've got a lot of programs and smaller priority projects in place that we've been conducting over the last 4 years. And regardless of this program coming to an official, kind of end with the funding cycle at June 30, we're hoping to be able to kind of run it forward with, with funding. It's too important. And luckily now that we have the Gender Equality Act as well, that gives us a big boost, or a big you must do piece. So that's really great. So it's a bit of a snapshot of the program.
You touch off on so many points there, and I didn't want to cut you off, but I could see us all throw our heads back laughing at how you're lamenting 25%. We haven't hit 4%. And I know Waffle and AFAC did some data collection a couple of years ago. Bronnie Mack went into there, and so in the paid services in urban areas, less than 4% across the country. And I saw Alex sent us a message there, as did Becky, about 6 and 8%. So yeah, single digit seems to be the norm. So we're like, we would love 25%. I
know, that's it. And look, we are proud of it, but we know we can do better. And I suppose one of the focus of the program is that we're hoping that our partners are taking on board what we're doing, and likewise we're taking on board what our partner agencies are doing, so we can actually work smarter across the sector to increase that. So if we can help overseas as well, then we'll give it our best.
And I'm always conflicted in that point where it's like I want to celebrate the achievements. 25% is amazing, and you're like, and we can do better. It's that everything's comparative. So for me, when I joined, we just tipped into 1%. So when we got to 4%, I'm like, yeah, but how am I celebrating 4%? And then we a bit, and so, and the same thing around the inclusion. I'm so glad that you introduced the word belonging. Oh my gosh, and I'd love to hear from others about that real insistence of fitting in fire services and other military, paramilitary. You know, it's like, be like this, check your difference at the door, and you know, we don't belong when we're not being ourselves. Love that you said that. I think, yeah, Quinn will probably have a couple of Brene Brown quotes for us, because I know she's as much of a fan as I am. So, and you've touched on some things about funding and about the importance of mentoring, things that we'll circle back around to, because they're key points that set off little radars in my head. But I want to hear from you, Becky. And now, because we talked about who's the highest ranking, I'm just like, oh, well, Becky's going to be at the end. I didn't mean that deliberately this time. So Becky, tell us a little bit about what you know, what's going on for you in a more granular way, and what resonates with what you're up to, with what you've heard the other women talk about here.
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I'd say, Donna, is we're here to talk about inclusion, and we're just looking at one element of our organisation. So we're talking about our operational firefighters, and actually what we know is it takes a whole organisation in order to provide our services to the community, and we should absolutely never forget that. So there are lots of opportunities for people to join fire and rescue services that aren't just about being a firefighter. You know, if I look across fire safety teams and community safety teams, you know, there is a much more blended split and a much more gender representation across those areas. Don't get me wrong, you know, if we look at our BAME representation levels, they really are staggeringly low across various areas of the UK. But actually, one of my frustrations that I do have, especially with government statistics, is that the people they want to count are just operational firefighters, and that for some in our organisations could feel like it devalues them. And so that sense of belonging that Dawn's talked about, well, how on earth could they ever feel that they belong if actually they don't get counted? So I think it's just a reminder to ourselves that we have whole organisations that we should be considering. And that's really, for me, the key thing around what leadership should be about in 2021. It is about how we create a space for people to bring themselves into our workplaces to be the best that they can be, because ultimately our communities need us to be the best that we can be, whether it's dealing with the worst day of their lives or whether it's actually going out and helping them have that worst day of their lives, because that's a crucial element, I think, of the role today. So how do we do that? We do that, I think, by leaders embracing difference for all that it brings, and not just segmenting into the 9 protected characteristics by law. Because whilst we're all 5 women here today, my goodness, we're all extraordinarily different, because our lives have taken different paths. And that's, for me, what the beauty of an organisation is. It's a bringing together of both, you know, physical and biological difference, but also life difference. So leadership needs to learn how to embrace that, and how then you allow people to be that in the workplace. And that can be really hard, because that's a challenge of the status quo, isn't it? You talked about the fitting in. So for people who look different, it's harder. But I think what we're starting to recognise more, actually, is that invisible difference, so neurodiversity as an example, is actually more prevalent than some of the visible difference to us in our organisations. And that's a facet of diversity. So diversity of thinking is really important. So I'm involved in quite a large UK executive leadership programme, and I've been the programme director for probably more years than I care to actually count. And one of its focus is around equality and diversity, but also around self-awareness. So really understanding emotional intelligence and how you can impact on others by being who you are, both in the sense of perhaps having a command and control approach to being somebody who is approachable, is able to have conversation with anybody, regardless of where in the organisation you work. And that's quite hard, you know, for people to be able to do that. So it's a journey for those individuals, and a journey of learning that actually should never stop, because, you know, in my parlance, every day should be a school day. So if we truly want to be inclusive, I think, and transformative organisations, the first thing that we need to do is we need to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, right. And that's the sort of thing that, you know, we explore with the cohorts that come onto the programme.
And so the people who are in that program that you've got, are they just the upper echelons? Where do they fit in the, you know, sort of the influence arc that they have?
So firstly, it's open to anybody who has the potential or has recently become a strategic leader. So we're not just operationally focused. In fact, believe it or not, we don't talk about operations. We don't do anything to do with practical firefighting on the programme at all. It is all about leadership. It's all about academia that sits behind leadership. So, you know, Brené as an example, adaptive leadership from HIFITS as an example. You know, we explore all those sorts of things with those individuals and give them space on the programme. So they don't just come for 2 weeks. It's a 5-module programme over 9 months. And what that allows the individuals to do is to then go back and try some of this stuff that they've learned in their workplaces, and then come back into both a safe and a brave space to talk about how it's worked for them. So it's a split generally. There's always, you know, more staff who come from an operational background, because that's the largest proportion of most organisations or most fire and rescue services. We have a really good split in terms of gender. Roughly a quarter of all attendees are women. And so it's really down to the organisations to decide who they think are the people with the most potential. Generally for us, it will be towards the middle or the upper end of middle management. If you look at the sort of hierarchy, although I'm loath to do that, who'll come on the programme. And it's extraordinarily successful. So if you do a count back at those people who come on the programme and then subsequently are successful in moving up to the next position and beyond, you know, you are talking over 3/4 of attendees will within 12 to 24 months pick up the next level of leadership within their organisations, or indeed others.
And thank goodness you're embedding emotional intelligence into the people who are going to move up through the organisation. I think it's one of the things that I've noticed in the operational, that single pipeline, is that we recruit technically interested and proficient people, and then we get to a point, for us, it's about the, you know, SSO commander rank, where a flow rate is irrelevant to my job. Being able to listen deeply to a person is everything that it's about. You know, the command and control is very much process driven. Everybody knows their piece in the puzzle. The tough times are when I have to think on my feet and actually listen to people. So the emotional intelligence at that level is something that can be a little underdone when the value is so weighted onto the technical proficiency, because that's where the base of the pyramid is, and it's what everybody got in on, and how they measure themselves on a gun pump operator. And so, yeah, we sort of struggle to broaden our understanding of what leadership qualities are. And I think that's great that you're bringing in people who aren't just from that pipeline to challenge that paradigm, because if you get people in uniforms who've all come through the same thing, well, oh, I agree, you're exactly right, because you think the same as me. So yeah, that diversity in there. And I love, Becky, that you checked our privilege on the uniform. There is something about, you know, it's cool. Kids want to give me high fives when I'm in a uniform. They don't when I'm out of it. And that we can, you know, the biggest privilege of our privilege is not seeing it. So, you know, I think, oh, I'm pretty cool. It's like, no, you're not cool. Your uniform's cool. It's completely different things. And we can, you know, I've found I can believe the hype sometimes, and especially if there's a culture that does the othering to make me better. You know, I have to have an other, the uniformed people, the operational people, we're the cool ones, or, you know, whatever the othering is, I think is a real risk in organisations and tears them apart rather than brings them together. So, yeah. So there's there's kind of this spectrum of before people even know about the idea of being a firefighter up to they're nearly up to being the upper management, and where we can inject these learnings and this understanding about the value of diversity so that that's what's flowing up that stream. Now, you talked about more years than you care to count. How one person's left carrying the can for so long? Because I see it in our organisation, there's a handful of people who are passionate and they've kept turning up for years and years. They have to retrain the new executive director that comes in, and it's sort of why is it that we get the smaller group? It always seems to be a passion project, but we can't get a big surge behind us or with us or in front of us. Who's got something to say on that?
So, Donna, I'm going to jump in before Alex, because I know she'll jump in. Yeah, I agree with you completely. And actually, so the National Fire Chiefs Council, which I mentioned, there's a police equivalent here in the UK, which is the National Police Chiefs Council. And what's really interesting is when a police officer picks up a chief officer role, whether that be assistant chief constable or above, and they become part of that group of the National Police Chiefs Council, there is an expectation that you will pick up a national role. So something like the work that Alex does, for example, in relation to equality and diversity for NFCC and leading that work. We don't have that within the National Fire Chiefs Council. I think we need to change it. And there's been big changes this year anyway, with the new chair coming in. And that's certainly a conversation that we are having, because you're right, it's always the same people that pick this up. And of course, we do know we have a limited shelf life. I don't mean to be rude, but we are all getting older. And at some stage, retirement will come along. And we need to have a pipeline beneath us in order to carry on, the great work. So whilst the programme I talked about was for strategic leaders, we absolutely have recognised that we need to be looking at supervisory, and we need to be looking at middle manager as well. And those are also programmes that we are now looking at building on behalf of the UK FRS. We had things in the past, but you know what? They were, as you described, they were based around technical proficiency. And there's a great analogy that a lot of academic research has done, where you put two ladders up. Of course, it have to be ladders. We're in the fire service. And if you look at technical proficiency, you become a BA wearer, you step up a rung. You become a pomp operator, you step up a rung. So you get to the top of that ladder in terms of technical proficiency. And then someone says, actually, you're really good at that. You should become a manager. So they move you across to exactly the same rung on the leadership and management ladder. And actually, this is the wrong place. You should be going to the bottom, not because you can't do it, but because you haven't had this development in the space of being a professional leader that you had in becoming technically competent at your role. So sorry to jump in, Alex.
That's all right, Becky. So I was going to say everything that Becky just said, but I think the other side of it is women being involved in groups such as WFS and Waffle. Part of, I think, the lack of interest in it, or the lack of involvement, is that things aren't as bad as they were perhaps when Becky and I joined. And so they have a great tolerance for the way that the service has improved. And yes, it has improved. Things aren't as bad as they were. But I do have this fear that, when Becky and I drop off the end of the system, and people that are on our, executive committee of WFS, that if we don't sort of maintain that momentum, we could quite easily slip back to, well, we don't need to try to get women or BAME staff into the fire and rescue service. And I just think it's quite a worrying time for me, that because we've made such improvements and we're by no means good yet, and people still don't come to work to be themselves. So I think there's that sort of workforce planning almost within the National Fire Chiefs Council, but also within our own groups of people, to make sure they keep that, keep flying that flag to make improvements and encourage more women to join. And when you talk about sort of training, education, one of the things we have been doing is a middle managers training session where we've used scenarios. So real life scenarios that have happened to women, to BAME staff, to some of our support roles. And we talk through the scenario and say, how do you think that makes the individual feel? And what's the impact? What's the risk to the organisation? And we don't sit there and say, you should, you know, be good to people with protected characteristics. But we talk about why people fit in and, you know, why it's important that they don't. And that's been really well received, because I think we put in training that somebody says, this is the Equality Act. But people don't actually think, oh, I've never thought that that's how it makes somebody feel. So I don't know whether I answered that question. I probably rambled on, but I think, you know, there's an importance of recognising that as we improve the service, less people feel the need to be involved in such organisations. And we've got to be careful we don't sort of drop the ball on that.
Absolutely. And I do feel that you answered the question and added another layer. And I agree, we're still on a steep incline, and it's so hard to pull it up the hill. And if we let go, it'll roll down terribly fast. So yeah, it's sort of like who can give us a chop out. Dawn, I'm sure that you've got a lot of facets to add to that question about, you know, because you're committing so much of your time in your full-time work and in volunteer roles. What are you thinking about, you know, the future and how we engage people to step into the roles, but also engage the organisations to get what the value is, and to, when we're having to prioritise, you know, COVID's hit us and we've taken have to take a budget cut, as you're saying, you know, your funding's got an end date at this point. You know, what are your reflections on what we need to do, or what we need our organisations to be hearing?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my brain was going a bit wild with so many bits to chime in so many different ways. I mean, that concept of succession planning and actually making the space somewhere where somebody wants to come in and learn from you, versus if they see you're doing a really good job, thinking we've got this covered so I don't have to worry about it, you know, and like both Alex and Becky have said, we're not going to be here for, you know, forever. I'd still like to think I'm younger than I probably am, but you know, there will be a time where I want to pass it over, and I have to pass it over, and I'm already looking at that through my, you know, my ranks and my membership at, you know, my brigade level as an example. But I think another really interesting piece, you know, and again, whether I'm going to ramble a bit here, but I think that notion of what a leader is and what leadership is, you know, I know I've hit it a couple times with, you know, being told that, you know, I'm too soft on a situation, or I'm not running my people hard enough, or, you know, I need to be firmer, I need to be, you know, showing a lot more leadership and doing everything. And I just don't subscribe to that at all. You know, and it's interesting though. So whilst I say I don't subscribe to that, it's because I don't really subscribe to it now. Not to say I haven't for the last, you know, 15, 20 years, where I have tried to, you know, mold myself into, you know, what a leader in a fire service looks like, or what a, you know, a leader in emergency management looks like. And then I found myself actually not happy and comfortable with who I am and what I'm actually portraying to those around me. And recognizing that we have eyes on us all the time, regardless of whether we think we're, you know, high up on the ladder, or we're, you know, next to somebody leading side by side and not in front or in back. So I think that's probably one of my messages, is actually stay strong to who you are, and your leadership skill you'll be known for that leadership skill. And I think there'll be others who are more keen to step up or to step into roles, you know, whether it's operationally, but, you know, I love what Becky said before, that there's a whole myriad of people and positions in each of our agencies that without any one of them, we would fall. So, you know, we need each of those supporting agencies. We need the financial services, we need the catering, we need the logistics, you know, we need the operational, we need those that actually can take the time and space to think. We operate as a team, and I think if we stop looking at that as a hierarchical type system and actually as a team system, we'll be better placed. And I actually think then we'll actually encourage more people to come into these roles, and yeah, to kind of get them in and keep them as well, because that's the other aspect, is actually people staying if they're not feeling a place for them.
Absolutely. I'm just still like, you know, amen to that kind of thing. I feel that I'm starting to get some wisdom with the grey hair, and that if only I could go tell that young woman who joined fire services, like, don't try to do it like a dude, because I spent so much energy trying to be something that I wasn't. And now that I, you know, and really through the saving grace that Waffle was for me, because it was the first time that I got to speak to women who are willing to speak openly about their experience, that I realised it's not me that's the problem, it's the system that's the problem. And in fact, I can be me if the system is broader and more embracing and engaging. And yeah, and, you know, I was really lucky to have that opportunity, which allowed me to kind of put some of the defences down and build up, you know, me in there. So, and you know, Quinn is one of those people who is young and being herself. And I think, you know, is it a generational change? Is it about she finds Waffle earlier, or, you know, what is the intersection that sort of gives somebody that security to be themselves? And I too would be saying, be yourself, and we'll find the way to love that in the fire services. So Quinn, I'm going to give you the privilege of being the last one around that loop, because as we said, the time has flown, and I wish we had another 3 sessions to go through. You're currently the president of Waffle. I know I've been in that role and worried about the succession planning, and that should I stay and what more can I do? And so where are you with what you think about how we engage people to come into the cause, how we encourage organisations, and you don't get to leave soon because you don't have the grey hair that I've got. You've got many more years in you.
I want to acknowledge that you think I'm the youngest and I don't have the grey hair, but that's thanks to my hairdresser. So well done.
Good work.
Hides the greys. But yeah, I just want to speak to that. Like, I wasn't always comfortable, and go back to a bit of Brene Brown. I did sell off parts of my soul to fit into the organisation when I started my career and become one of the guys. And it wasn't until I started the WAFA experience that I sort of started to realise that there was another world out there. And part of, I think it was just that I just didn't know any better until I got to share those experiences. And some of the real growth transformation for me has been at the last 2 WAFA conferences, 2016 and 2018, because we had some, I know we talked about that right at the start, and we want to acknowledge that Becky was the highest rank in the room, but it is important to acknowledge that rank. I hadn't seen a female leader at those higher echelons in my service before. And 2016, we had Katarina Carroll, we had Jonah Olsen, and we had some really strong female leaders. And there is a lot to be said for that. You can be what you can see. So for me, that was really inspirational. Carried on 2018, we brought Alex over to Wellington, and we had the wonderful Kelly Martin as well, speaking authentically and truthfully about their leadership journeys. And I think, Donna, if we look back to the outcome statement that WAFA published after the WAFA conference, we were trying together to describe those conferences, and we came up, I'll throw this in view, Brene Brown quote, about the energy we came out with that from those conferences, and it was connection. The energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard and valued, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from that relationship. So I think for me, about growing WAFA and keeping it going for future, for the next generations coming through until we no longer need to exist because we've solved the issues that we're trying to work with. It's creating that connection from people coming into the organisations, people within the organisations, and those who might have become a bit fatigued because they've been in there battling it for so long. So it's climbing up the ladder myself to become the leader, which is not necessarily visible for others, but it's also ensuring that I have others coming up behind me. So for me, WAFA's, we've brought on a youth ambassador, which has really given us an injection of that younger, different viewpoint that we're not necessarily, because even though I might be young, I don't have that, it changes so quickly between the generations. And for me, one of the things I know, even though my time at WAFA is coming to an end, I'll still stay connected with the group. I'm also going to go into working with the youth and ensuring that from a young age, young people know that no matter what your background, no matter your gender, your thoughts, whatever, the fire service is an opportunity for you that you can work with, and that will help grow our ranks for the future.
Oh, I love it. I had really hoped that Quinn would take us to a Brene quote. She's one of my favourites. I sort of just look up and think, yes, I want to be more of that. And the theme of the conference is inspiring action. And you've all talked about what you're doing, what the future can hold. And you've all inspired me personally. I literally have goosebumps and a little bit of tears in my eyes. And that's a sign of a great conversation. I really, really appreciate all that you have brought to this conversation, to the work that you're doing across countries and organisations and roles. I encourage you to keep doing it. I encourage our viewers to find the way that they're going to take action as well. Thank you so much for your time. Be well.